Welcome to School Easy. This is an introduction for grade 11 students. School Easy will give you easier ways of studying difficult topics. Hello children, welcome to grade 11. Congratulations on passing from grade 10 to grade 11. This video is specifically for science students who have taken physics and chemistry, mostly for children who haven't taken mathematics. In grade 11, you are introduced to a lot of new concepts, new topics, new forms of calculations like calculus, trigonometry, vectors, logs. All of this becomes very overwhelming. The jump from grade 10 to grade 11 is extremely high. It's a big leap. I suggest that you learn all of these concepts separately before starting your word problems or theoretical problems. If all of them are introduced at once, it becomes overwhelming and difficult to understand each concept. Do not try to start solving a theoretical problem and the vectors and the logs all in one go. Before you start your physics and chemistry problems, learn how to use logs. Do problems just on logs. There will be many websites showing this on the net. Do not introduce theory. Similarly, learn vectors, addition, subtraction, dot product, cross product. Do problems on vectors alone, not physics problems, no theory. Plain vectors. Master yourself in these topics, vectors and logs, and then start using them in physics and chemistry. Logs are heavily used in chemistry and vectors in physics. Also trigonometry in physics. In this video, I'll give you an introduction to trigonometry, especially for the students who are not taking mathematics. They'll find trigonometry a little difficult. It is not very difficult. It's quite easy. I'll teach with graphs. Remember, if as a KG or a grade 1 child, you just had to start solving word problems without learning addition and subtraction, and you had to do all of it together, wouldn't it be difficult? That's the case you find in 11th. So please get used to these concepts initially before starting your problems. Let's get into the basics from grade 10. We see a 30, 60, 90 triangle, a right angle triangle which follows the Pythagoras theorem where side addition of two side squares is equal to the hypotenuse square. So we see in the first triangle that BC is 1 square plus the side AC square. It is 1 plus 3 equal to 4, which is hypotenuse square, and square root of 4 is equal to 2. That is the measurement of side AB. The same will follow in the other triangle also. Now how do we find the sine of an angle? It is opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So sine 30 is 1 by 2. Cos 30 is adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So it is root 3 by 2. And tan 30 is sine 30 by cos 30. That makes it 1 by root 3. And now if we look at the 60 degree angle, the side opposite to 60 degree is root 3. So sine 60 is root 3 by 2. The side adjacent to 60 is 1. So cos 60 is 1 by 2. And similarly tan 60 becomes root 3. This was just a brief recap of the introduction to trigonometry. Let's do calculation of sine, cos and tan for angles that are not 30, 60. Angles that cannot be drawn on a triangle like 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270. This can be done through a graph. We plot it on the x and y axis. Understand that the sine of an angle is actually the value on y-axis of a graph, and the cos of an angle is the value on the x-axis on a xy graph. Now if I draw a 0-degree line on the graph, it will fall on the x-axis. There is no value on the y-axis. The value is 0. Hence sine of 0 is 0. And cos of 0 will be the value on x-axis, which we will take it to be 1 unit. Tan of 0 is sine by cos of 0, and that hence is 0. Now let's go to sine 90. A 90-degree line will fall on the y-axis. So it will have a value on y-axis and the value on x-axis is 0. Hence sine 90 is 1 and cos 90 is 0. Since tan 90 is sine divided by cos and cos 90 is 0, it's undefined because anything divided by 0 is undefined. Now let's go to 180-degree angle. It falls on the x-axis but on the negative side. So, since y value is 0, sine 180 is 0, but cos 180 is minus 1. It's negative 1 because it falls on the negative side of the x-axis. It's a negative value. Tan 180 naturally becomes 0 because sine 180 is 0. Let's see sine 270. If you see the angle 270, it falls on the y-axis but in the negative direction. Hence, the value on y-axis for 270 degree is minus 1 and on x-axis it's 0. Sine 270 becomes minus 1, cos 270 becomes 0 and tan 270 is undefined. So learn how to you find sine and cos based on a graph. Similarly, we'll go to other angles and we'll just use the xy graph to understand sine, cos and tan. In this video, we'll find the value of sine, cos and tan of positive and negative angles which are multiples of 30 or 60 degrees. We won't use the formulas. We will use graph and with simple drawings find the values. You don't need to memorize anything. We will show you easier ways of calculating sine, cos and tan. These are some of the sine and cos expansion formulas. As I said, there is no need to memorize this if you're not a math student. For example, if I ask you what is sine of 150, you might go ahead and do sine of 90 plus 60 and then use these formulas. You will get the answer in that way, but we will look at an easier method. Now let's look at the sine of some angles which is greater than 90 degrees. These will be mirror images of 60 degrees. So let's look at the sine 120 using the formula. We can do it as sine A plus B sine 90 plus 30, and with the formula expansion we have it as root 3 by 2. Similarly, we will look at sine 300, which is sine 360 minus 60 sine A minus B. With the expansion we have it as minus root 3 by 2. It requires a little bit of calculation, and sine of a negative number is negative. So sine of minus 60 will be minus root 3 by 2. We'll see how to plot this on the graph and get it very quickly without any difficulty. Let's look at the sine of 60 degree and mirror images of 60 degrees in other quadrants. If you look at this, 60 degree falls in the first quadrant and the sign is simple. It is the value on the y-axis. It is the side opposite to the angle which falls on the y-axis. We look only at the value of y-axis for the sine of an angle. We look at the value on the x-axis for cos of an angle. So here we have the value as root 3, the hypotenuse as 2 as we have seen in the triangles before. The sine is root 3 by 2 for 60 degrees. Now let's look at the mirror image of 60 degrees in the second quadrant, and this angle is 120 degrees. Here value of y coordinate is again positive, root 3, hypotenuse is 2, sine is root 3 by 2. It's a mirror image of 60 around the y-axis. Now let's look at the angle that is diagonally opposite to 60 degrees in the third quadrant, and this is 240 degrees. It's a mirror image of 120 around the x-axis. Now we come to the negative value of y, which is minus root 3 by 2, and hence the sign is minus root 3 by 2. Let's look at an angle in the fourth quadrant, which is a mirror image of sine 60 degrees around the x-axis, and this angle is 300 degrees. Again, the y value opposite this angle is minus root 3 because it's negative by 2. The hypotenuse, the sign is minus root 3 by 2. Now that we have found the sign of 4 different angles in a little less than 2 minutes without using any formulas, look at how simple it is using the graph, and we don't make mistakes also with calculations. Now we look at sign of negative angle. This was not covered in my last video, hence I'm covering it here. This is also very simple. You follow the same concept, but a negative angle is measured anti-clockwise from the positive x-axis. So here we have angle minus 60 degrees. As you see, it is the same as plus 300 minus root 3 by 2. Your sign is again minus root 3 by 2. It follows the formula sine of minus 60 is minus sine 60. But now let's go into a quadrant where sign is positive. Let's go to the second quadrant. I know you might not come across these problems. When you solve physics, you will not get sign of a negative angle which is so high. But this is to understand the concepts. Now, what is this angle? 60 plus 60, 120 plus 60, 180 plus 60, 240. This angle is minus 240 degrees. What do you see? The sign here is positive. It is not minus root 3 by 2. It is plus root 3 by 2. Now, does the formula fit in here? Sine of minus theta is minus sine theta. Is the formula wrong? No, the formula is not wrong. But there is a condition on that formula. It applies for angles that are less than 90 degrees. Only then it holds true. If you go beyond 90 degrees, you must use a graph to understand properly, and you will never go wrong with the graph. You will not make calculation mistakes, and you don't need to memorize anything. So please follow graph to find sine and cos tan of angles which are greater than 90 or negative. Let's look at cos of angles greater than 90 degrees, which are mirror images of 60 degrees. Cos of 120 is cos 90 plus 30. We'll use the formula cos A cos B minus sin A sin B. We get a value negative 1 by 2. Similarly, we can do cos 300, which is cos of 360 minus 60, cos A cos B plus sin A sin B. Eventually, we calculate and find the answer. And look at cos of negative numbers. And cos of minus 60 is half following the formula, but cos of minus 20 is not plus 1 by 2, it is minus 1 by 2. And I'll explain in the graph why it is so. Now let's look at the cos of some angles which form mirror images of 60 degrees. Let's take the first angle, 60 degrees in the first quadrant, and cos, as we know, is the adjacent value upon adjacent side upon the hypotenuse. Here the adjacent side is 1, which is the value on the x-axis. It's the x coordinate. We look at the values of x-axis for cos of an angle. The hypotenuse is 2, so the cos here is 1 by 2 in first quadrant for 60 degrees. Now, the mirror image of 60 around y-axis in the second quadrant is the angle 120 degrees. If you see, x has now become negative in the second quadrant. The value of x is -1, and -1 by 2 will give you a -1 by 2 as cos of 120 degrees. Now the angle diagonally opposite to 60 degrees will fall in the third quadrant, and this angle is now 240 degrees. Again, here the value of x for this angle is -1, as it is in the third quadrant. It's a negative side of x-axis. -1 by 2, and it forms -1 by 2 is the cos of 240 degrees. Let's look at the cos of a mirror image of 60 in the fourth quadrant. The angle is 300 degrees, and here we have positive value of x, that is 1 by 2, and the cos of 300 degrees is 1 by 2 because it's in the fourth quadrant. Now let's look at negative value of cos of negative angle. Negative angle, as I said before, should be taken anti-clockwise from the x-axis. So we will take it anti-clockwise from positive x-axis, and this is -60 degrees, and the value is still the same. It is 1 by 2 because -60 degrees is same as positive 300 degrees. Let's delve a little bit deeper. If I go find negative angle which falls in the third quadrant, the cos will become negative. It does not follow the formula. If you look at this, it's a little difficult to draw now for me. I take the angle 60 plus 30 plus 30, which is 120 degrees here. Negative 120 degrees. It falls in the third quadrant, and my answer is -1 by 2. It is not 1 by 2 as the formula says. The formula cos of minus theta is equal to cos theta applies for angles that fall between 0 and 90. So you have to be very careful about that. Sine, cos, tan of negative numbers that is mentioned in the formula is for angles less than 90 degrees. So if you follow the graph, you will never go wrong. Though those formulas are simple, but when it goes beyond 90 degrees, it's best to follow the graph. Let's look at the tan of some angles that are mirror images of 60 degrees. This formula is complicated. Tan A plus tan B upon 1 minus tan A tan B. You see undefined, so you have to use a different approach. Tan of 180 minus 60 for tan 120. Okay, here we don't have undefined values, but we go through a slightly more complicated calculation to get it as minus root 3. Now we can also do tan of negative numbers. Tan 60 is minus root 3. Tan of a negative angle is minus tan. But if you see, tan of minus 120 is plus root 3. As before, the graph will explain why it is positive. As said before, tan, sine, cos of negative numbers, the formula that you see is for angles less than 90 degrees. Greater than 90 degrees, you have to refer to the graph. Let's start with the 60-degree angle in the first quadrant as we have done before. But now we have tan, which is sine by cos. Hence, we have to take both the y and the x value. Sine is the y coordinate, opposite 60 degrees, it's √3, and the x value is on the x axis, x coordinate, which is 1. Here the hypotenuse gets cancelled out when we do sine by cos, hence we don't need the value of the hypotenuse. Tan of 60 is √3 by 1 in the first quadrant. Let's go to second quadrant. Our angle now, as we have seen before, is 120 degrees, mirror image of 60 degrees around the y-axis. In the second quadrant, y is positive √3 but x is negative 1. Hence we have √3 by -1. So tan of 120 degrees is negative √3. Let's go to the angle which is diagonally opposite 60 degrees in the third quadrant, and this angle, as we have seen before, is 240 degrees. It's mirror image of 120 degrees around x-axis. Here we see that both y and x are negative, minus √3 minus 1. So we have minus √3 by -1, which is actually plus √3. So tan of 240 degrees is positive as both y and x values are negative and they get cancelled out. Let's go to find the tan of an angle that is in the fourth quadrant. This angle, as we have seen before, is 300 degrees. Here this is a mirror image of 60 degrees around the x-axis in the fourth quadrant, and y is negative √3, value of y is negative but x is positive. We have tan of 300 as minus √3 by 1, so it is negative √3. If you see, it matches what we do in the formulas. It hardly took 2 minutes to find the value of 4 different angles. Now let's look at tan of negative number. If you see here, we have negative minus 60 degrees is our angle here, which is the same as plus 300 degrees. We measure it from anti-clockwise from the positive x-axis. So this is again minus √3. Now let's go to tan that is positive, which is in the third quadrant. We have seen from formula that tan of negative number is negative. But look at this, tan is also positive in other quadrants. So if I go to the third quadrant to this angle, which is minus 120 degrees, what is my tan? It is plus 3, plus √3. But we don't see it in the formula. As I have told before, the formula applies for angles that are less than 90 degrees. Otherwise, you have to use the graph to get the right answer without any calculation mistakes. So always depend on a graph. In the exam, draw a graph in your rough sketch and see the angles that you need sine, cos, tan to. They form mirror image of which angle in which quadrant, and your answer is right there. Let's do a small exercise. It will hardly take 5 minutes. Find the sine, cos, tan of 30 and 45 degrees and mirror images of these two angles in all the 4 quadrants. If you look at the acronym, add sugar to coffee. Add A means sine, cos, tan all are positive in the first quadrant. Sugar S, which means sine is positive in the second quadrant. T, tan is positive in the third quadrant. Coffee, C, cos is positive in the fourth quadrant. This is the acronym that I have written in the previous slide. All you need to know is where does your angle lie, in which quadrant, whether it is a positive angle or a negative angle, and is it a mirror image of 30 or 60 or 45. This will give you the answer immediately. So this is School Easy, giving you easy ways to find solutions to difficult problems. Please subscribe to my channel and you will get more videos like this.